Hi, welcome back. I'm Marc. I was a senior artist on Overwatch and now I teach art for a living. In this week's episode of YouTube Art School, we'll go over 6 horrible art tips that you've heard and used before to your detriment. I can't let this happen to you, so let's debunk them all. Let's get this class started. All right. Class is in session. Pay attention. Let's get right into it with these tips that might not at all sound that bad at first. But that's the trap, and I'm not gonna let you fall for it, okay? The first bad tip that you've heard before has to do with learning art. So let's start with that. To make more progress, just study more, bro. If you've ever felt like you're not making progress, the problem 99% of the time lies in how or what you're studying, not your actual abilities. Like, regular school is known to not be the optimal way to learn for a good half of the kids. Basically, anybody can learn art if you approach it the right way. It's just that most people don't. Understandably so. It's not the most obvious thing to figure out. Unless you're one of my students, of course. So just doing more of the same is not going to help. Year over year, you should notice significant growth if you practice a lot. So if you're not seeing that, well, you gotta change how you learn. Don't lose motivation though. It's important to understand that there's nothing wrong with your brain if you feel like you've been plateauing. 99% of the time, again, you just need to change your approach until you find something that speaks more to you. And then what about that other 1% though? What if you never find it? Well, my guess is that you're unfortunately cursed. You'll just have to wait for new brain transplant when the technology gets there. And the second tip we've all read in the comments on YouTube videos is that you don't need to stress about learning art too much. Just have fun with it and you'll get better naturally over time. Wrong. Well, kind of right, but also wrong. Every single system in our body is built to get better, to improve. I'm going on a tangent here, but it's all linked together. Hold on. And think about it. You work out, you build muscles, you get exposed to people a lot, you build a stronger immune system. You study a lot, you get more knowledgeable in theory. Maybe you've heard this before, but if something is not growing, it's dying. That might be an exaggeration because I don't think we lose our skills if we don't use them. But what I'm getting at here is that even though it might not always be the first thing that we want to do, if you focus some of your efforts on getting better at art, studying the fundamentals, studying anything art related, you'll grow as an artist. You'll get better. And that is precisely what's going to make you feel fulfilled and wanting more. This is kind of counterintuitive and something that I've learned a lot later in my career, but you don't do that. If you don't put time and effort to get better, working on those hard studies, seeking uncomfortable feedback and actively seeking to learn more, you'll rob yourself of the true happiness that getting better at something provides. No growth, no happiness. It's like a slow killer almost, doing its damage over the years. You'll start to lose motivation at some point if you don't challenge yourself here and there. You'll get frustrated faster and eventually rage quit art for good. Or maybe not. Maybe you're weird. My advice though is to focus on growth. Drawing for fun is great, but you 100% also need to draw for growth, to challenge yourself, which is not always fun in the moment, but it's so fun and rewarding over time. It's kind of like investing your money. But hey, if you're happy with your current skills and you haven't been improving at all, you're a broken person. It's science. The third tip that I've been trying to debunk for years, and it just drives me crazy, this one. There are still so many people out there who think you need a degree to work as an artist. Please understand that degrees are worthless. W-O-R less. You don't need a degree to work as an artist, and as a matter of fact, the vast majority of professional artists don't have one. It's actually pretty rare. I'll link my source in the description. See, I'm not getting this out of nowhere, but based on the last US census, over 85% of all working artists in the US that live off their art alone, real professionals, don't have an art degree. And think about this. Only 14% have one. That's basically nobody. So why should you have one? Trick question. You shouldn't. It's literally useless. But it will cost you up to $150,000 to $200,000 here in the US if you go to the most expensive schools. I guess I need to disclose that there are some success stories where some did great after going to school, but understand that most would have probably done great without it too. If your art education is going to cost more than a few thousands in total, my best advice is to seriously do something else, unless you have so much cash that you don't know what to do with it. And by something else, I mean there are many better ways to invest in your art education, and I'll get to that in a second. But again, don't do it because of the degree that you think will help you find a job. It won't. So what will then? What matters? Your portfolio is all that matters, literally. Maybe your personality too, if you ever plan to work in a team. Like, just be normal and work on putting together the best portfolio. Seek to learn the skills that will allow you to do that, right? Most of your efforts should go towards that, even if you are in school now, because your parents will disown you if you don't go. Your portfolio should be all that matters. And to that end, YouTube is a great place for art education. I've made hundreds of free videos at this point. Many old colleagues of mine or like industry friends have mentorships, which can be a bit pricey, sure, but still peanuts compared to traditional art schools. And you'll find other online programs that target like specific skills. There are some good ones on like Skillshare, Udemy. Of course, my own art program is a sick option. And somehow it's still the only program that's equivalent in content to what you get with a 4-year art degree that you can get online for less than most pen tablets. Even more so with the current sale that I've extended for just a few more days. Check it out with the link in the video description. But plug aside, nobody cares if you have a school diploma or not. Employers don't care, clients don't care. Everybody only cares about the content of your portfolio. Going to an expensive traditional art school should be your last resort if all else fails. And if you must, you should really only do it for the networking side of it. You know, even though you can also kind of find that online, like the private art Discord community that my students have access to. All right, I'll stop. The fourth smooth brain tip that you must have heard if you went to art school or if you've watched a ton of tutorials online is that you should have a unique art style as soon as possible. If you don't, you're a loser. I actually felt the same way when I was younger. Like, this tip has been going around for a minute, but yeah, I always focused on the style because that's probably what I had read in a book back then or online somewhere. Doesn't matter. Style really isn't that big of a deal though. As a professional artist working on projects in like game development or animated series, you have to adapt your style to the style of the project. Most experienced professional artists can switch between styles quite easily as a result. You know, like, it's just a recipe. Your style is a recipe. It's like cooking. Like, if you imagine an experienced chef, you can probably follow another chef's recipe and get a similar result if he's got enough experience, right? It all comes down to your understanding of the fundamentals, like knowing enough to spot like how a particular artist might have deviated from reality, in like what way, by how much, that kind of stuff. Without a solid foundation as an artist, without a good understanding of the fundamentals, your style really can't manifest itself properly. So like, focus on those things first. Your style will develop over time almost on its own. It really doesn't need your active input. So don't rush it. It's not that important. To anyone that's experienced, it's way more impressive to see good technical skills in less experienced artists rather than a particular style. And yes, I'm talking for everybody here. The fifth bad tip, and we're almost at the end. Here it is. Hard drawings help you improve more. The more you struggle, basically, the more gains you make. I see so many people going for super elaborate paintings that would be a huge challenge even for like a pro, but they have the skills of a potato. And it's my experience over 30 years of drawing that it's always way better to aim for paintings that are relatively easy for you overall, to stay in your comfort zone, so to speak, or at least for the most part. I'm sure you've started many drawings and then just gave up on them halfway or ended up spending months on them crying and making little to no progress. And it's just like with your art studies, like pacing yourself when doing creative work is also super important. Can't do too much of it at a time. When a piece of art is complex, not always, but usually it'll be because the art fundamentals required to make it art extensive. Like, imagine having no experience and you just start juggling with 8 balls right from the start. Like, somebody's gonna get hurt. Like, first you would start with 1, right? Or maybe 2, I guess, and then 3, and then more, and work your way up to 8. So I remind my students all the time, focus on creative work that matches your knowledge of fundamentals, and then tackle challenges that are well within your comfort zone, like 80% within your comfort zone, and challenge yourself with like the remaining 20%. But I really wouldn't go any harder at it than that. You'll keep running into walls after walls, and the whole process will just become a chore, a drag. Ugh. So always keep a challenge. If you aim to get better, that's important, but make sure that that challenge is not overwhelming. That little detail there makes or breaks this tip. And the last bad tip is something that a lot of you might have realized by now, but if you haven't, being good at art is not enough to get recognized, and certainly not enough to live from it. I have a ton of students at this point, for example, that are extremely skilled, like well into expert level, but are still having trouble finding paid gigs or work in general. Because it's one thing to be a good artist, but you have to sell your product to, sell your services. We're salespeople, kind of. Like, short of having a studio job, most artists looking to earn from their art are basically one-man businesses. If you want to make a living from your art, You also need to learn how to sell, how to advertise yourself, handle contracts, taxes, etc. But all of this starts by having an online presence and posting lots of art for people to know that you exist, engaging with people, or like, yeah, getting really good at networking. Either way, the art part is only like half the work at most. The rest is advertising. Absolutely don't just focus on your art skills unless you care about having a following and eventually having your art support you financially. But of course, if you want to just be an artist in complete obscurity, that's cool too. Then ignore this. And that's going to be it for this week's class. So I hope that helps. Let me know in the comments what you think of these tips. You agree? Disagree? You want to fight? And since you've been a good student and followed until the end, you get freebies. What? In the video description, you'll find a link to one of my brush sets that you can get for free if you haven't already. They're quite nice, like real nice. And now make sure that you have notifications enabled to be on time for next week's class. Late students will be sent straight to